All right, so today's video, I'm finally going to take on the topic of optimal training, and is it something we should be striving for? There's a few different things I'm going to touch on today. The first thing is going to be the short answer on if we should be striving for it or not in the context of that. I also want to touch on priorities in our own training. I want to touch on a juicy, a spicy example, a little bit of biomechanics, which will fire everybody up a little bit. Unintentionally. And I also want to leave this video off at the end with my takeaways and what I see as the most important thing in this entire discussion of optimal versus suboptimal, or biomechanics versus just lift or just get stronger, that whole debate. I do think that third part that I'm going to touch on for the end of the video is going to be the most important. I am going to put timestamps if I remember. If you are limited on time, probably watch that part first. I do think it's going to be the most important message of the video, but all the juicy stuff is going to be the first two parts too. So I guess watch the whole thing, as always. Should we strive for optimal training? Here's the short answer. The answer is going to be completely based on context. That's it. There's no right or wrong answer here. It just depends on the context of what you're looking to optimize and who you are and what your goals are. It really depends. The context depends on who the lifter is, what their goals are, and what optimal means in that given situation. Let me break this down, then give you an example of something that we're seeing now, which is, I'm foreshadowing, this is going to be the biomechanics example. But before we get to that, the first thing I want to touch on is just going to be priorities in our training. We tend to put too much stock into tangible variables when trying to optimize, and even then we miss the point by asking the wrong questions and not understanding that you won't find the right answer to your question when you don't seek the answer from the right angle. And there's a saying that there's no such thing as a stupid question, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. At the same time, we do need to reflect on the questions that we ask, because a lot of the time when we're not getting the right answer after searching for years and years, we're probably just asking the wrong question, and we're probably attacking that question from the wrong angle. And we could shift our perspective a little bit and get that answer that we're looking for. How many of us, myself included, I'm not superior in this context, have had a question about lifting, a tangible or intangible variable with lifting, that we've been wanting to know for years? Think about when you were a beginner. Think about beginners right now. They're all over the place confused because of all of this stuff in the fitness industry that's confusing them 100%. But at the same time, how do we ask better questions to get the answer that we're looking for? And I think that's something that we don't put enough time into, beginners, advanced lifters, and everybody in between. And if we can take our time and think about why we're asking the question and optimize that question to get the result we're looking for, that's something that would be pretty beneficial to us. An example I want to dive into for this, to give you guys some context here, is going to be about rep ranges. So let's use rep ranges for an example of a tangible variable. And I'm going to make it tangible because this is simple. Do rep ranges matter? Yes, they do, but without context, they don't matter. Even if you have some context, say you're asking what rep ranges are specifically best for hypertrophy, that still isn't the right question, or it's not the best question to be asking. Here are a couple examples of questions to ask yourself or someone else that will get you a better answer. What are the benefits and limitations of the 6 to 10 rep range on squats in my current program? Very random, but if you can substitute those variables out with what you're actually looking for, and that would probably get you a better answer if you're asking yourself and doing some reflection, or if you're asking someone in the community, or a YouTuber influencer, maybe like myself. That question would get you a legit answer. That would give you some context to find the answer that you're looking for. That will help you optimize your training. Another one would be, based on what I've tried before, which rep range worked the best, or if you didn't record your progress, which one seemed to work the best and seemed the most promising, and why? Why is that? This way you can start a little bit deeper and get a little bit closer off the bat to what you're actually looking for and have that legit context that you need. The biggest issue with the hunt for optimal training arises when you don't know what variables to prioritize. And this is something that I'll give a tangible example here with biomechanics, but when it comes to the hunt for optimal training, a lot of the times the reason why so many people are bitter towards trying to find optimal training is because people that are trying to optimize training don't know what to optimize. You see this all the time with beginners. And can you blame them? Not necessarily. Sure, they have to take some of the blame. Of course, a lot of the blame goes to, not going to name drop, but Instagram Explore page, fear-mongering post about biomechanics on the first one, right at the top slot. Just complete clickbait for beginners, and that's going to confuse the crap out of them, of course. But what happens is now we're ditching the idea of optimal training because we see people manipulate beginners on, say, Instagram and TikTok that are completely missing the point of what the people on those platforms actually need to hear. The issue isn't biomechanics. The issue isn't these little variables in your training. We should always be striving for better biomechanics, but that should be reserved for people that have a good foundational understanding of lifting. There's no point in trying to tell someone that an iliac pull down is better than an overhand pull up when you don't even understand what volume is yet. It's things like this, and I'll touch more on that later because I think that's going to be an important part of this video. But you have to understand what needs to be optimized and what your totem pole is in your current training. If you've built your knowledge base and your foundation of the most important variables in your current context of training, now you know what the next thing to optimize is going to be. And that's how lifters keep progressing and keep getting better. It's not like you just start lifting, have no idea what frequency, volume, rep ranges, all that stuff even is, and then you just jump to something like biomechanics. That's completely missing the point, and that's why so many people are bitter towards optimal training. But the issue isn't trying to optimize your training. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's encouraged, at least in my mind. The issue is knowing what to optimize and when. And that will be touched on later, but for now, let's get into the biomechanics. This is going to be a real-time example, something that we're going through right now in the future history of lifting in the fitness industry. Biomechanics are huge right now. We go through different phases as a community, always have been and always will be, when it comes to trying to optimize certain variables. Right now, we're in a phase of seeking optimal biomechanics, and this caters towards more experienced lifters than beginners, and I'll touch more on this. Lots of beginners are getting stuck with their training because of an overemphasis on biomechanics, and this has led to a divide in the community on whether biomechanics matter or not. And there's an issue with this. I think the debate completely misses the point of what actually matters. In my opinion, seeking optimal biomechanics is important, but that's besides the point. It's not if optimizing biomechanics matters or not. It's about whether that should be a priority or not in your training. It's not that biomechanics and optimizing biomechanics does not apply to our training, because of course it does. Most people should know this. Or that for some reason it just doesn't magically apply for beginners. It's an argument over prioritization. And here's my point. Physically, biomechanics matter for beginners about as much as they matter for anyone else. I do not like when more experienced lifters try to gatekeep aspects of training and treat beginners like they're stupid or that they're dumb for focusing on this. The real issue with it comes down to the mental and educational part of lifting, where if you don't understand how to train or program properly, now optimizing biomechanics is useless because you don't have the fundamental knowledge to apply your new biomechanics knowledge to. And on top of that, you won't be able to differentiate from what real optimal biomechanics are versus the gimmicky stuff you see on Instagram. So real-time example right here so you guys can kind of understand this one. The whole biomechanics thing, just to finish this point off. What ends up happening is you have these beginners that are over-focusing on biomechanics because they're force-fed it with the algorithm. People are taking advantage of the beginners, which is clearly a terrible thing. But the argument that we've turned this into is we're fighting against biomechanics. And that's not the right fight to be fighting. It's not biomechanics versus not biomechanics. It's not should you focus on it or should you not. It's who should be focusing on it versus who shouldn't be. It's an issue of the context and the role that biomechanics play in your training. And I'm not trying to make this video about biomechanics. That's just the best example that we can all relate to right now, because you're spoon-fed it as soon as you open up Instagram or TikTok or whatever apps these people use. To finish this video off, this is what I see as the most important part of the video. This is something that I'm going to be expanding on my last point. I'm not just going to tell you who should be fighting what fight or debating which debate and leaving it at that. I want to provide my own perspective, my own argument with this. I don't like to make a mockery of what we do. And to elaborate a little bit more on that point, when we're talking about like actively going against optimizing our training, I do think that's making a mockery of what we do. And nobody else does this in any other sport or hobby. The best of the best have everything perfect. They have it down to a specific, perfect routine. Everything has a reason. Every lift is in there for a particular reason. Take any other sport. The best athletes in any sport, their equipment, their mindset, their attitude, their approach, their technique, their practice, their gameplay, like everything is perfect. Perfect. And everything is like that for a reason. So why are we, bodybuilders or hypertrophy enthusiasts, not seeking to go down that same path and that same mindset? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I understand where people are coming from when they're attacking something like, say, biomechanics, because the wrong people are focusing on it. But at the same point, we can't just ditch this. We can't ditch the idea of optimal training, because that's something we should always be striving for. Should we be trying to optimize at the expense of other variables? Of course not, because at the end of the day, that's not even optimal. But we should always be trying to make everything as perfect as we can be. Is perfect something we'll ever achieve? Probably not, but perfect for us in that given context, yeah, you could get pretty damn close to it, and I think you should be trying to do that. That's how we get better at things. That's how we improve what we do. That's how we become the best of the best, or the best that we could possibly be. And I don't see a point in fighting against that just because we're kind of bitter at a certain fad right now in the industry that the wrong people are focusing on. So I don't like the idea of just ditching the perfect training that we should probably be striving after. And even if we never perfect everything and have that exact routine that we need, at least you got as close as you could to it, and you learned as much as you could and got the best results that you possibly could throughout your time training. As bodybuilders, we don't get the benefits of other sports or hobbies where you receive instant feedback on methods we try. We need to have patience and own the reality that we could go months of experimenting with nothing to show for it. So you take something like, I don't know, as simple as fishing. Like if you fish for 2 hours in one spot, sure, like yeah, you lost 2 hours, but now you know like that time of day in that spot, probably not the best, and you can kind of just move on. But with lifting, it's not like you can just go do a leg workout and then finish up that leg workout an hour later and you're like, oh, it didn't work. Like you have to wait, and you have to wait for this stuff to compile, and you have to wait weeks, months, even sometimes years. So we have to be able to own the fact that we need to be patient, and we might be wasting time trying to optimize our training, because that's just part of the journey. You're going to try things that don't work, and when you find things that don't work, you narrow your options down, and you're more clearly on the path to find things that ultimately do work. Let's not make a mockery of our craft. Lifting isn't as simple as, it doesn't matter, just lift. Sure, you'll get results just lifting, but that's just results. You'll be stuck in the minor leagues with that mindset. The pros do it differently. Their training and attitude is perfectly optimized to them. Everything is done for a reason, and they know what that reason is. They're the best of the best for a reason, and that reason is the constant pursuit of optimizing their routine and making it the best that they possibly can for themselves. And ultimately, if you want to have things be perfectly optimal, you're never going to find that from somebody else. You're going to find that from yourself. So if you're an advanced lifter and you're trying to get even better to become elite, you're going to find that answer within yourself, and you can't rely on some generic, like random study that you found online to tell you what's actually going to work. That's stuff like that you're going to find in your own training and your own reflections. I do want to leave the video at that for today. just some food for thought. Obviously, there's no conclusive answer to the question, so that's just my interpretation. That's my answer. I'd be curious to know your thoughts in the comments if you think optimal training is legit and if it's something we should be striving towards. Let's start the conversation on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know.